Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Gwen Gringheis, and I'm the Assistant Registrar of Recruitment at the John H. Daniels Faculty, and I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. This is a Zoom webinar on graduate programs in forestry, and so if that's what you came here to learn more about, you are absolutely in the right place. We will start with a formal presentation, after which we will be very happy to answer your questions. And so if you have any questions during and after the presentation, I will encourage you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Using that button, you will be able to enter your questions there, and we will answer your questions live for you. But without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Professor John Casperson to talk more about the programs. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Gwen. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here to help inform you about our programs in Daniels. I'm specifically going to be talking about the forestry programs, which overlap somewhat with other programs. If you have questions about the overlap, please feel free to ask about it. And I'm specifically going to be talking about the research programs, the PhD and the MScF, the Masters of Science in Forestry, which can be distinguished from another program, which I'm not going to talk about much today, which is the professional program called the Masters in Forest Conservation. If you are interested in that program, as well, there are other sessions that I can point you to, but of course you're welcome to listen to both and compare and contrast them. We do have two master's programs, the professional one and the research-based one, and you potentially may be interested in both. So listening to both of these sessions would be worthwhile. I will put out an advertisement for the MFC program as well, just so that you know about it. It's different from our research-based masters in that it's course-based learning with an internship, and it's sort of as the moniker suggests, it's focused on training people to get jobs in the forest industry or in the conservation realm, whereas the research stream program is focused on doing research. As you can see from this sort of layout of how the Masters in Forest Conservation progresses, it's a 16-month program. You start in September, you take courses in the fall and the winter. In the summer, you do this internship, which is meant to give you the kind of professional experience that will help you get a job or know where you want to go by the time you graduate after the second fall. And you can see the various courses that you take there. There are a couple of electives as well. The main thing to focus on there is that internship in the summer, which is tied to the professional training. Anyways, if you're interested in that program, the website, the Daniels website, lists several info sessions about that program, starting, I guess, on Thursday, but the next several Thursdays, if you're interested. If you have some simple questions about that at the end, I'm happy to entertain that as well, but any more involved questions should be asked of the director of that program, Sally, who will be leading those information sessions. Okay, so on to the topic here, which is the research stream programs, the PhD program and the Masters of Science in Forestry. They, specifically the Masters compared to the MFC involves fewer courses and more research. And ultimately what these are meant to provide is the kind of academic training that would be required to not only get a PhD, but pursue a career that may involve research or draw on extensive academic training. So I'm sure you all have a general sense of what goes into a PhD. It's laid out here in sort of simple format. Just to point out at the top of the slide here, you see that we currently have about 40 students. It varies from year to year, depending on who comes in and who graduates. We have a smaller cohort of master's students some of whom do transfer from the MScF into the PhD program. If you're interested in that, you can ask questions about that. So when I say fewer courses, more research, it's spelled out here compared to that previous slide that I showed you for the master's where there was multiple courses per semester. Here we have, in the case on the left-hand side of the PhD, we have just 4 courses over the course of the PhD. Of course, you can do more if you want, but that's the minimum. And that involves a graduate seminar, which all of the graduate research stream students take, plus 3 electives that would be chosen by you and your supervisor to make sure that you have the training that you need to conduct the research that you would like to conduct. Similarly, on the right-hand side, we have the same list of things required for the MScF degree, which is just 2 courses. So 1 graduate seminar and 1 elective. So you can see that's the difference between those 2 programs. Of course, the PhD takes longer. I'll go over the timeline at the end of this presentation. And the main difference is basically that at the end of a master's degree, you would aim, for example, to publish maybe a single paper, maybe more, whereas for a PhD program, you would aim to, publish, like 3 or 4 or 5 papers, and your thesis would contain 3 or 4 or 5 chapters that were essentially what we call data chapters that could be published. Whereas in the master's, it might be just one such chapter. The bottom of the slide here, I also have the steps that are involved, in proceeding to defending your thesis. I'll talk about those at the end as well. So I'll show this slide again. Before I do that, I want to just give you a broad sense of the topic areas that forestry covers. So forestry is a very interdisciplinary field. So it spans the natural sciences and the social sciences. So we have economists and we have biologists spanning the natural and social sciences. But then, of course, we also have the engineering field. So people who, do basic science, but also very kind of applied science in the sense of, say, building science. This is where there's some overlap with what happens elsewhere in Daniels. And of course, forestry itself. The economists and the biologists among us are not only doing basic research, but because we're in forestry, which is an applied discipline, we also do applied research. I have a list here of the core faculty members in forestry. So this does not include other faculty members in Daniels who might have overlapping interests with us. These are people who are doing research and teaching directly in the forestry program, with a few others listed at the bottom there. These are cross-appointed members who actually are not in Daniels, but have core interests in forestry as well. And probably the most important thing I can tell you in this presentation is that in order to get into our research stream programs, you need to identify a supervisor and communicate with that supervisor about, the kinds of research that they're interested in that might overlap with the kinds of research that you're interested in. And then most importantly, convince them to, support your application. Because unlike some other programs, getting the interest and support of at least one potential supervisor is key to success in the program, but also just getting in the first place. So I assume a fair number of you have probably already contacted potential supervisors or plan to do so. But some of you may also still be just looking around for your options and haven't gotten into that yet. And if that's the case, then you might want to look at some of the existing openings. These are positions that have been advertised, at least here, if not elsewhere. And basically, this is where professors who have funding or particular projects they want to attract students to will post. And some of these also maybe are more kind of, what's the word? Just general descriptions of lab activities, posted by supervisors who are just generally interested in students at any given time. So if any of these interests you, they're on the website. You can follow the links and contact the professors there. And the previous page I showed you just that listed all of the potential supervisors, you can click on those links to get the contact information. To put a finer point on my suggestion to contact a supervisor, let me just point out that what the funding package is and the fact that the supervisor actually contributes half of the student's take-home pay. So we have a guaranteed funding package which amounts to $17,500 take home for the student. That doesn't include tuition and fees. And then at the PhD level, that's 31,000. So that's your take home, basically your pay to cover your cost of living, or at least partially your cost of living, while doing your research. And the point I want to make here is that approximately half of that is paid by the supervisor. And so if you apply without having a supervisor kind of lined up, the chances are small that some supervisor is going to appear at the last minute to provide half of that funding. So hopefully that gets that point across. And what I suggest is that you find one or two people who have research interests that overlap the most with yours, send them your CV with an explanation of why you think you would be a good fit. In terms of the details, I'll just go over this quickly. Most of this is on the website as well. The deadline, there's essentially two deadlines. There's 3 items listed here, but the first deadline is in January. The second deadline is in March. Technically speaking, the reason we have the first deadline is that in order to be eligible for certain university, sort of top level scholarships, that's when you need to apply. We do have a second application period in March. A fair number of students do, wait until then to apply. But it's in your best interest to apply earlier, simply because offers will be made to good applicants who apply early, and hence if you wait, some opportunities you may miss them. This is particularly true. The details of this are probably best discussed with their potential supervisor. They will tell you, well, you better apply by January, otherwise the position may be gone, something like that. There's some distinction here between January 5th and January 12th. January 5th is where most things are due, but January 12th is when the actual documents have to be submitted. Anyways, again, that's all online. If you have questions about that, also we can answer them at the end here. The documents they have to send in include a CV. So this is formally what you submit online to Daniels, not what you send your potential supervisor. That's up to you how you handle that. But you formally have to send in a CV, or letters of reference, a statement of your interests, and then a separate writing sample, which would be something that best represents your writing skills, whether that's a paper that you actually have published, or a manuscript you're working on, or maybe one of your best samples of writing as a student, a paper that you submitted to a course. You also have to submit your transcripts so they can be verified. And then if your English is not your first language, you have to take an English language proficiency test. And just to give you a heads up for the transcripts, so for the master's program, just to make sure you meet the minimum requirement, you should have a bachelor's degree from a recognized university that's, not necessarily a forestry degree, but an allied, sort of a allied discipline. And for the master's, you should have a final year average of at least a mid-B. And then the same is true for forestry, for the PhD program, but at that level, you should have a minus standing. And one last little thing here, that item at the bottom, for international applicants, there's a set of equivalencies. So not all grades translate, directly into an ABCD scale. And so you need, if you are concerned about meeting the minimum, then you need to look at this, use this equivalency tool to figure out what is a mid-B in the country that you come from. Okay, and I think I'm almost wrapping up here. Just circling back to this slide, which kind of contrasts the two programs. As I said, you probably have a general sense of what goes into a PhD or a master's, but let me just contrast these two a little bit. The master's program, first of all, I think I'm going to put the time scale on here as well. The master's program is, typically takes 1 to 2 years, and you take 2 courses in the first year, and then at some point within the first year and a half to 2, you defend your thesis. In the meantime, you will, depending on what field you're in, you may have done field work. If you're fortunate, you may have started field work in the summer before you start. Like you say you apply this January, you're accepted, maybe you do field work before you even start classes, then you take some classes, and then you do some more field work, maybe not as much the second year, and then defend your thesis. That's what goes into a master's degree. And again, the aim is to do research at a level that's sufficient to publish, ideally 2 or 3 papers, but maybe just 1. And you don't have to publish the paper to defend your thesis, but it should be considered publishable. That's kind of what's expected. There are no other steps as there are in the PhD program over here on the left. So you can see that the PhD program takes longer, takes more than twice as long, typically 4 to 5 years. And that's because you're supposed to be doing quite a bit more research. So the same kind of timeline plays out in the sense that you take a couple of courses your first year, then you do you start some field work or start your lab work or doing it, whatever the research entails. But in the PhD, then you probably take a couple more courses the following year. And then in that same year, you probably start or do your qualifying exam. That's typically in the first year or 2. And that's meant to make sure that you have the foundation to proceed with the research. So your committee would, assess your proposed research and make sure that success is likely. And then that's when the research kicks in. So for the following 2 to 3 years, you're basically squirreling away in the lab or at the computer or in the field, doing your research. And then when that's, wrapping up, you have a series of defenses. We have an internal or departmental defense, which is sort of a preparatory step for the final oral exam, where you have an external examiner who comes in to evaluate your thesis. That's not the case for the master's program. There is no external examiner. The people who decide on your thesis are the members of the committee that have been with you all along. All right, I think there's maybe one last point here, about the funding. I mentioned the amounts. This refers here at the bottom to the length of the guaranteed funding. So the PhD funding is guaranteed for 4 years, whereas the master's funding is guaranteed for 1 year. In both cases, maybe more so at the PhD level, it's not unreasonable to expect some additional funding uh, to come your way after, the fourth year. So maybe it's a half, an extra half year or an extra year, but it's not guaranteed. It depends on the supervisor. It's something to, be negotiated usually at the time, although you could raise it even before you start. Probably won't get a guarantee, but you might get some sense of the likelihood of that from your supervisor. And I should say that if there is an extension of funding, it's going to be entirely from the supervisor, not from the faculty. It's split 50-50 between the supervisor and the faculty for the first 4 years. After that's up, you're referred to as out of cohort in terms of funding by the department, and the department does not provide any more funding. So the supervisor may opt to not only continue providing what they've provided, but also what the department provided for the first 4 years, or they may just opt to continue providing their portion, which means you get half as much. Or in the worst case scenario, they say, sorry, 4 years is all I've got. And, you'd have to look for other sources of funding. There, of course, are awards and scholarships available to students. And the last thing I should mention here is that there are TA-ships. So along the way, all along the way, you can, help teach courses, maybe with your supervisor, potentially, elsewhere in forestry, and even elsewhere across the university, you can apply for positions that are advertised. And this is separate from the guaranteed funding package. So that's, in other words, the funding you get from that is on top of what you get, and it doesn't influence that. So that's different than some other units, including the PhD program in architecture, landscape, and design, where TA-ships are built into the funding package. So that's an important distinction to be aware of. With that, I think that's it. I will stop and entertain any questions which you may have. I gather that you've been maybe texting or typing in some of those questions, and Gwen is going to help field them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. So you can stop sharing your presentation and we will open it up for questions and answers to all of our attendees. Just a reminder to submit your questions. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you are welcome to submit your questions there, and we will answer those questions live for you. If anybody has a question that they don't want to submit, but they choose to send us an email, our email address is futurestudents@daniels.utoronto.ca. I've also put that there in the chat, so if anybody wants to send an email, they are welcome to do so. So just taking a quick look here, I don't see any questions that have been submitted. Oh, here they come. So first question is, how is it determined which courses are required for students to take?
That is usually a consultation between you, your supervisor, and your committee members, more so between you and your supervisor. But in the course, let's say you're talking about the PhD program, say you have your first semester, you have a committee meeting, you're taking a course, you're writing your proposal, you present your research, and let's say it depends on certain technical skills, whether those are statistical or, laboratory skills. Say you propose to do something kind of technical and the committee feels like you don't quite have a full grasp of that, then they would say, well, you probably need to take a course in that. That would be one scenario. More typical would be simply that you are, you're picking an area of, you're picking a research area, and let's say it's not, let's say you did a degree in biology or something, or environmental science, but not forestry, and people felt like you didn't have a full grasp of the kind of applied side of forestry. They might say, well, you need to know more about, how forests are actually managed. So you should take a course in silviculture or something. That would be another example. So it wouldn't be that it was some particular skill that's missing, but some general knowledge Another example would be, say you're kind of branching out, in say you have two supervisors, one of whom is an economist, and you actually don't know that much about economics, then maybe you need to take an economics course. But again, that's how it's decided, is through your committee meetings.
Thank you so much. So this next question is, are you accepting international students and is funding available for them?
Yes, but it depends on which program you're talking about. The answer is no when it comes to the MScF program, unless some, you know, it's special circumstances. The reason being is that the Daniels faculty is not currently providing half the funding for master's research stream students. So unless the supervisor is willing to fully fund that, or the student comes with some kind of external source of funding, the answer, unfortunately, for master's students is no, except in those special circumstances. In the case of the PhD program, yes, we are accepting applications from international students. Um, what was the question, Gwen, again, that exactly at the end there?
The question was if there would be funding available for international
Yeah.
students. So I guess
Yes.
also for the PhD.
Yes. Yes, there is funding for the international students. Uh, it's, it's a different sort of pool of money, and it maybe is a little more competitive than for domestic students. But yes, so by all means, we are encouraging international students to apply. And when you contact a potential supervisor, just state that you're an international student, and discuss what that means. But just so you know, the funding amounts that I talked about for the PhD program are the same. So you get the guaranteed funding for an international student is that $31,000 a year
Thank you
at the
so
PhD
much.
level. Yep.
So you mentioned that there's a direct to PhD option. Do the requirements change for that?
Um, Direct PhD, I assume you mean applicants that don't have a master's would apply directly from, with an undergraduate degree, but not a master's degree. That does exist. The requirements don't change. Um, the admissions committee would look at that a little more closely. Uh, um, so I would say that it's a bit more like uh, a student who already has a master's may have a better chance of a success, but strong applicants who are coming directly from an undergraduate are admitted directly. But it might just be, you know the committee might want to see even stronger applicants in that case.
Thank you. So if someone does have a master's in forestry and environmental policy and a bachelor's in agroforestry, is it possible to have another master's for research? Please advise.
So I think the question is, can you get a second master's degree? Uh, yes, I think that would be the best, that question would be best directed to the potential supervisor. Again, um, just I'll without forgetting what this question was, I'll just use this as another reason to point out that, again, the most important thing is to find a potential supervisor. And if you've got that in place, then these other questions are probably a little less important as to whether you'll get in or not. So circling back to that question, though, yes, if you found a supervisor who said, oh, this applicant already has a master's but wants to apply again, then I think the answer would be yes. I think the admissions committee and the supervisor would just want to make sure that this is in the best interest of the applicant. In other words, there would probably you'd want to see evidence that there's sort of value added to the applicant and that it's not sort of redundant. In other words, if in the end the person asking the question essentially wants to pursue a PhD, then why not go directly to a PhD? On the other hand, if this person who's asking wants a second master's in a related field, then that could make sense. And you'd say, okay, a second master's, that's fine. On the other hand, if it was just another degree of the same type, then you ask, okay, just is this, does this make sense from a professional standpoint for that person? There might be circumstances around kind of international applicants wanting to get a second, degree in the same field, and that obviously would be considered. There are reasons around immigration and training where that might make sense as well. But again, I can't give you a pat answer to that question.
Thank you. So this question is in regards to tuition. So in addition to the funding, is tuition ever waived? And is it ever waived for international students?
Can you repeat the beginning part of that question again?
In addition to the funding, is
Yeah,
tuition also waived? Like is there any
yeah.
situation in which tuition might be waived, and could it be waived for international students?
Okay. I might just rephrase the question. Is tuition covered? uh, and the answer is yes, tuition is covered. So let's say you're an international student who's interested in the PhD program. I said the guaranteed funding is what I call the take-home funding is $31,000. So that would be take-home money. In other words, money go directly into your bank, and you would not have to pay the tuition out of that because the tuition is covered as part of the funding package. So in that sense, the tuition's not waived, but you don't have to pay it either. So that's why I rephrased the question. So you know you don't that you don't tuition will be paid for you, so you don't really see that. Except the exception comes, say, when you leave the funded cohort after 4 years, then somebody needs to pay your tuition, and that might be you. So then at that case, it is not waived. I think that answered the question.
I think so. Thank you. So that is all the questions that have been submitted. So if any of our attendees do have any additional questions that they would like Professor John Casperton to answer, please enter those now so we can go ahead and answer those for you live. If you do not have any questions, that's wonderful. That means you got all of the answers to all of your queries that was covered during the presentation, and we're very pleased that you joined us to get that information.
Thanks for your interest, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. We wish you a wonderful day. If a question comes up in the future, please send us an email. If I'm not able to answer your email, I will forward it along to John to get a more accurate response. Oh, hang on. There's some quick questions that just come in.
There's
Um,
also something in the chat, Gwen. I don't know what that is.
okay, I'll take a quick peek. So what is the difference between the master's? Let me see if I understand. What is the difference between the Masters of Forest Conservation and the Masters of I think this is
MScF. Yeah.
a Masters of Science Conservation of Forestry program. Does that make sense? MSCC?
CF.
No,
MSc. Well, okay. Um,
MSc of Forestry. MSc. Okay, yes. What's the
okay.
difference
Yeah.
between those two forestry
Yeah.
programs?
Right. So at the beginning, I tried to explain that. So what I've talked about today mostly is the research stream program. So the PhD and the master's, and these are focused on research. Not so much. You do take courses, but they're focused more on the research than the courses. And the main thing is they're focused on research, not necessarily training you for for the profession of forestry. Uh, so for example, the MScF program, the research-based program, can be thought of as kind of a feeder program into the PhD. So if you're interested in doing a PhD, but you want to, do a master's first, then you'd go through the research stream program to get to the PhD program. On the other hand, if you wanted to become a registered professional forester the fastest way possible, you would go through the MFC program because your goal is not to do research necessarily, but to get trained to become a professional forester, then you would go through the MFC program. Another important distinction is that the the research stream program you get funded, you get paid while you're doing the research. That's not the case in the professional program. In the professional program, you pay for the program. So it's like you're investing in your own future by getting the training. You do the courses, you do the internship. You would get paid while you do the internship typically, but you wouldn't get paid while taking courses. And, so it's an expensive program. So, that's oftentimes that's the best way to explain the difference between to potential applicants. It's like if you want to pay for your program, then you do the MFC. If you want to get paid, you do the research stream program. And you ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I want to get paid? I'm going to do the research stream program. Well, the answer to that is, well, it may not prepare you for what you want to do, which is get a job, and become a registered professional forester. That's not to say you can't do the research stream program and somehow end up back in the profession. It's just not the normal course, and I wouldn't recommend it if that's really your goal. And again, the MSc program is not, you don't get paid. You have to pay for it. So you have to, make sure you have the funding, but you need to think of it as an investment in your own future professional training.
Thank you. Is there a place where someone might be able to find a list of research programs?
Um, do you think that means like research areas? I guess so.
I think so. Areas of
Yeah.
research
So
probably within forestry, I imagine.
yeah. So I mean, I'm going to share this. Can I share the screen, Gwen?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Let's see. Um, whoops. Why can't I? I can't. Oh, here we go. So the first thing I suggest is that you go look, as I said before, um, it's all about finding a potential supervisor. And obviously you need to share research interests with that supervisor. Um, uh, uh, but it's almost more important to find somebody who has funding, for example, than it is to find somebody who has research in your exact area. So if there are two people who have two faculty members here that have similar research interests, which is certainly the case in some, one may have funding and one may not. And so it's more important to find somebody who has funding than necessarily has your exact research interests. That's it. So anyways, if you follow these links, there will be, you can go to the individual researcher lab page or whatever that'll describe the research that they do. This other slide I showed you, again, this is from the website. This lists openings for research stream. You can see right there that, some of the general areas that for which there are currently openings. So I think that maybe answers the question. Here's a page where you can see, there's several positions in forest fire science. There's several positions in biomaterials science, economics, behavioral ecology. So you get the idea.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this question is whether or not we will share a recording at the end. Yes, we will share a recording with everybody who registered for today's information session. So they will be able to watch and hopefully get their questions answered. So again, I think we have answered all the questions that have been submitted. So I think we can say thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.